What if the meals that kept human beings healthy for thousands of years were not lost to history, but simply replaced? Not because something better came along, but because something more profitable did. The modern diet was engineered for shelf life, for addictive palatability, for industrial scalability. And in the process, the meals Scripture had been prescribing for millennia were quietly pushed aside and forgotten. Today I am going to show you 20 of them, starting with the one whose exact ingredients God prescribed in Scripture, and that modern nutritional science has confirmed produces a complete amino acid profile that most modern bread cannot match. Stick around because number 3 was prepared by Jesus himself after the resurrection, over charcoal on a beach. And number 6 appears in every long-lived population on Earth across every culture ever studied for longevity. Number 1. Bitter herbs with lamb. The Passover meal prescribed in Exodus 12:8 with specific instruction to eat the lamb with bitter herbs and unleavened bread. The bitter herbs containing glucosinolates and sesquiterpene lactones with documented liver-stimulating, bile-producing, and gut-cleansing activity that the ancient world understood as purification, and that modern hepatology confirms as detoxification support. Exodus 12:8 is one of the most specific dietary prescriptions in all of Scripture. God does not merely instruct the Israelites to eat lamb, He prescribes the exact combination: roasted lamb, unleavened bread, and bitter herbs. The bitter herbs, most likely including endive, chicory, horseradish, and wild lettuce depending on the region, were not garnish. In the ancient Near Eastern medical tradition, bitter plants were understood to cleanse the liver, stimulate bile production, and prepare the digestive system for the rich protein meal that followed. Modern phytochemistry has confirmed what that intuition was built on. Bitter herbs contain sesquiterpene lactones and glucosinolates that stimulate bile secretion from the gallbladder, support phase 2 liver detoxification, and activate digestive enzyme production in ways that modern gastroenterology recognizes as clinically significant. Bile is not merely a fat digestion compound, it is the liver's primary mechanism for eliminating fat-soluble toxins, metabolic waste, and excess hormones from the body. Eating bitter herbs before a protein-rich lamb meal was functional digestive medicine encoded in religious law. The Passover meal was not arbitrary. Every component had a purpose that the accumulated wisdom of the ancient world had identified through generations of observation, and that modern nutritional biochemistry is still mapping in molecular detail. Number 2 was not a meal anyone invented. It was a meal God prescribed. Not in general terms, not as a principle, but with specific ingredients listed by name in a specific chapter of Scripture, and modern nutritional analysis has confirmed that those exact ingredients, combined in the proportions described, produce a nutritional profile that most modern commercial bread cannot replicate. Number 2. Ezekiel's bread, prescribed in Ezekiel 4:9 with 6 specific ingredients: wheat, barley, beans, lentils, millet, and spelt. A combination that modern nutritional analysis has confirmed produces a complete amino acid profile through the complementary protein mechanism, alongside beta-glucan, resistant starch, and prebiotic fiber that commercial bread does not contain. Ezekiel 4:9 contains one of the most extraordinary dietary prescriptions in Scripture. God instructs the prophet to make bread from a specific combination of 6 ingredients: wheat, barley, beans, lentils, millet, and spelt. The context in Ezekiel is a period of siege and deprivation. God is prescribing a bread that will sustain the prophet through a period of extreme nutritional stress. And the combination he prescribes is nutritionally remarkable. Grains alone, wheat, barley, millet, spelt, do not provide complete protein. They are deficient in the essential amino acid lysine. Legumes, beans, and lentils are rich in lysine but deficient in the sulfur-containing amino acids methionine and cysteine that grains provide. Combined in the proportions described in Ezekiel 4:9, the 6 ingredients create a complete protein through the complementary mechanism, all essential amino acids present in adequate ratios, a nutritional principle that modern dietetics did not formally describe until the 20th century. The barley and millet contribute beta-glucan for cholesterol and blood sugar management. The beans and lentils add resistant starch and prebiotic fiber that feeds beneficial gut bacteria. The spelt contributes a different gluten structure than modern wheat, more digestible for many people who react to commercial varieties. A civilization sustaining a profit through siege with this bread was not improvising. It was applying nutritional knowledge encoded in divine prescription thousands of years before any nutritional science existed to explain why. Number 3. Roasted fish over charcoal. The meal Jesus prepared for the disciples on the shore of the Sea of Galilee in John 21:9. The simplest possible preparation of the omega-3 richest food available in that region, providing DHA and EPA that modern neuroscience has confirmed are essential structural components of brain cell membranes and that the modern diet has systematically depleted. John 21:9 records one of the most intimate scenes in all of Scripture. After the resurrection, the disciples return to fishing. Jesus is already on the shore when they arrive. He has prepared a charcoal fire. There is fish on it. There is bread. He invites them to come and eat. This is the risen Christ preparing a meal. And the meal he chose, fresh fish, simply roasted over charcoal, is the preparation that modern nutritional science would identify as the one that preserves the maximum omega-3 fatty acid content of any cooking method available. Fish from the Sea of Galilee, sardines, anchovies, tilapia, are among the richest sources of DHA and EPA on Earth. DHA makes up approximately 30% of the brain's gray matter. It is a structural component of every synaptic membrane. EPA has documented systemic anti-inflammatory effects. These essential fatty acids cannot be manufactured by the human body. They must come from food. Meta-analyses of clinical research consistently find that regular fish consumption is associated with significantly lower rates of cardiovascular disease, major depression, cognitive decline, and inflammatory conditions. The modern diet replaced this meal with fried fish and seed oils that destroy omega-3 content, with processed fish sticks, with aquaculture products fed grain rather than the plankton that creates omega-3 in the first place. Jesus prepared it over charcoal. Simply, without processing. That was not incidental, that was the correct preparation. Number 4. Fermented grain porridge. The slow-fermented ancient equivalent of sourdough porridge eaten across biblical civilizations, whose long fermentation process breaks down phytic acid, partially pre-digests gluten proteins, and produces a meal with a glycemic response and mineral bioavailability profile that modern commercial grain products cannot match. Before commercial yeast existed, before industrial milling, before the modern bread industry engineered grain for speed and shelf life, grain was prepared the way the ancient world had learned through generations of observation produced the best results: soaked, fermented, and slow-cooked. The grain porridges eaten across biblical civilizations, emmer wheat, barley, millet, spelt, were fermented for hours or days before consumption. This was not a culinary preference. It was nutritional technology. The lactobacillus bacteria present in the grain environment, given sufficient time, consume the phytic acid, the anti-nutrient that binds zinc, iron, calcium, and magnesium and prevents their absorption. They partially break down the gluten proteins into peptides more easily handled by the digestive system. They produce lactic and acetic acids that lower the grain's pH, further improving mineral bioavailability and reducing the glycemic response. Studies comparing traditional long-fermented grain preparations to modern commercial equivalents consistently find lower glycemic responses, better mineral absorption, and improved digestibility. The modern diet replaced this meal with instant oats, commercial breakfast cereals, and refined flour products processed in hours rather than fermented over days. What was lost in the name of convenience was exactly the process that made the grain nutritionally functional. Number 5. Stuffed grape leaves. From the vine that appears over 500 times in Scripture, and that Jesus described as himself in John 15:5, with grape leaves containing quercetin and resveratrol at concentrations that the fruit itself does not match. Used as food wrappers and medicinally for inflammatory conditions across ancient Mediterranean and Middle Eastern traditions. The vine appears more frequently in Scripture than almost any other plant. Most people know the grape for its fruit and its juice. What the ancient Mediterranean world knew, and what has been quietly forgotten in modern food culture, is that the leaf of the grapevine is food and medicine simultaneously. Grape leaves contain quercetin and resveratrol in concentrations that the fruit itself does not always match, particularly the leaves of wild and traditional varieties. Quercetin has documented anti-inflammatory effects through cyclooxygenase inhibition Antihistamine properties studied for allergy management and antiviral activity. Resveratrol activates sirtuin proteins associated with cellular longevity and has been one of the most actively researched compounds in anti-aging biology. Stuffed grape leaves, the meal that survives today in Lebanese, Greek, Turkish, and Egyptian cuisines as dolmas or warak dawali, are not a modern invention. They represent one of the oldest prepared meals in the Mediterranean world, a meal whose wrapper is as medicinally significant as its filling. The ancient world used grape leaves for inflammatory joint conditions, wound wrapping, and fever management. The modern diet discarded the leaf in favor of the processed juice. The leaf is where much of the medicine was. Number 6. Carob meal, from the locust bean that John the Baptist survived on in the wilderness in Matthew 3:4, containing up to 40% dietary fiber by dry weight alongside condensed tannins with documented antimicrobial and anti-diarrheal effects that were used in European hospitals for childhood illness before pharmaceutical alternatives existed. Matthew 3:4 records that John the Baptist lived in the wilderness on locusts and wild honey. Scholars familiar with the Judean wilderness have long identified the locusts as the pods of the carob tree, Ceratonia siliqua, known throughout the ancient Near East as locust beans or St. John's bread, named precisely because of this association. The carob tree grows wild throughout the region where John ministered and has sustained desert populations for thousands of years. As a prepared meal, the pods ground into flour mixed with honey, prepared as a porridge or flatbread, carob delivers up to 40% dietary fiber by dry weight, a concentration that exceeds virtually every other food in the ancient pantry. The fiber is primarily insoluble, making carob one of the most effective gut regulators available from any plant source, addressing both constipation and diarrhea through the same fiber-normalizing mechanism. The condensed tannins, proanthocyanidins, have documented antimicrobial activity against rotavirus and other intestinal pathogens. Carob was used in European hospitals for childhood diarrhea as a matter of clinical routine before pharmaceutical alternatives became standard. The prophet who prepared the way for Christ was not suffering in the wilderness. He was eating one of the most therapeutically strategic foods available in the ancient Near East. Number 7. Leek and onion soup, mourned by the Israelites in Numbers 11.5 alongside garlic and fish, staple foods of Egypt whose loss in the wilderness was grieved as genuinely as the loss of freedom, with the leeks and onions providing inulin-type fructans that specifically feed lactobacillus and bifidobacterium species in the colon. Numbers 11.5 records one of the most emotionally charged food references in Scripture. The Israelites in the wilderness are reduced to tears by the memory of Egyptian food. Among the things they specifically mourn, leeks and onions. This grief has been dismissed as weakness and nostalgia. But in the context of what leeks and onions actually do to the human body, their loss was biologically significant. Leeks, Allium ampuloprasum, and onions, Allium cepa, are among the richest dietary sources of inulin-type fructans, prebiotic fibers that specifically feed lactobacillus and bifidobacterium species in the colon. These are the bacterial species most associated with immune regulation, gut barrier integrity, production of short-chain fatty acids that fuel colonic epithelial cells, and protection against pathogenic colonization. Before anyone understood what the microbiome was, the ancient world was eating a diet rich in allium vegetables, garlic, onions, leeks, that was systematically building and maintaining the gut ecosystem that immune function depends on. The modern diet replaced this meal with processed soups, commercial broths, and ingredient lists where onion appears as flavoring rather than as the primary therapeutic component. The Israelites who wept for the leeks and onions of Egypt were not being dramatic. They were experiencing the biological consequences of losing their prebiotic supply. Number 8. Goat cheese with herbs, from the milk of the Promised Land described as flowing in Exodus 3:8, aged into cheese through traditional fermentation. Containing A2-casein that research has found less inflammatory than commercial dairy, vitamin K2 in MK7 form that directs calcium away from arteries and into bone, and live bacterial cultures lost in pasteurized commercial cheese. The land flowing with milk and honey was not flowing with pasteurized, homogenized commercial dairy. The milk was goat's milk, a fundamentally different food, fermented and aged through traditional cheesemaking into a product whose nutritional profile modern dairy science is only beginning to fully appreciate. Traditionally made aged goat cheese contains A2 casein protein rather than the A1 casein dominant in most commercial dairy. Research has found that A1 casein produces a bioactive peptide during digestion, associated with digestive discomfort and inflammatory response in sensitive individuals, which may explain why many people who struggle with commercial dairy tolerate traditional goat cheese without difficulty. Aged goat cheese is also one of the most significant dietary sources of vitamin K2 in the MK7 form, the specific form that activates matrix Gila protein, which removes calcium from arterial walls, and osteocalcin, which deposits calcium into bone. K2 deficiency is directly implicated in arterial calcification and osteoporosis. The herbs traditionally paired with aged cheese in the ancient world, thyme, oregano, rosemary, added their own antimicrobial and antioxidant compounds to a preparation that was already therapeutically significant. The modern diet replaced this meal with processed cheese products whose live cultures have been pasteurized away and whose nutritional identity bears little resemblance to what the ancient world was eating. If these meals are resonating with you and you want to go deeper, I put together a complete biblical healing diet collection in the first pinned comment below. 5 practical guides covering biblical meals, breads, fermented foods, and healing preparations that Scripture prescribes. And 2 special bonuses you will not find anywhere else. Everything you need to eat the way the Bible intended starting today. Link is pinned below. Number 9. Lentil stew, the meal Esau traded his birthright for in Genesis 25, providing 18 grams of complete protein per cup alongside iron, folate, and resistant starch, with regular legume consumption identified as the single most consistent longevity predictor across every long-lived population ever studied worldwide. Genesis 25 records that Esau traded his birthright for a bowl of red lentil stew. This transaction has been interpreted for centuries as impulsive, short-sighted, and theologically significant as a forfeiture of covenant blessing. But in the nutritional context of the ancient world, the exchange makes a different kind of sense. Lentils were not dismissed peasant food, they were survival food, calorie-dense, protein-rich, shelf-stable for years when dried, and nutritionally extraordinary in a world where protein and mineral deficiency were constant threats. Modern nutritional science has confirmed what ancient cultures understood through necessity. Lentils provide approximately 18 grams of protein per cooked cup alongside iron, folate, zinc, magnesium, and potassium in highly bioavailable forms. Their glycemic index is remarkably low for their carbohydrate content, providing sustained energy without blood sugar spikes. Their resistant starch content feeds the colonic bacteria that produce butyrate, the short-chain fatty acid that is the primary fuel for colonic epithelial cells, and the compound most associated with colorectal cancer protection. Population research across every culture that has ever been studied for exceptional longevity, the so-called blue zones in Sardinia, Okinawa, Loma Linda, Nicoya, and Icaria, finds legume consumption as the single most consistent dietary predictor of long, healthy life across radically different food traditions, climates, and ethnicities. Esau's birthright was valuable, but his body knew what it needed. Number 10. Barley bread. The bread Jesus used to feed 5,000 in John 6, the grain of ordinary people and soldiers, containing the highest beta-glucan concentration of any grain with an FDA-recognized health claim for cardiovascular protection that most pharmaceutical cardiovascular supplements cannot achieve. When the Gospel of John records the miracle of the 5,000 fed with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, the barley detail is historically and nutritionally specific. Barley was not the prestige grain of the ancient world. It was the provision of the poor, the common, the ordinary, exactly the people gathered on that hillside. And it turns out that those ordinary people were eating one of the most cardiovascular protective grains ever studied. Barley contains the highest concentration of beta-glucan of any grain, the soluble fiber that forms a thick gel in the digestive tract, slowing glucose absorption, reducing LDL cholesterol through bile acid sequestration, feeding beneficial gut bacteria through colonic fermentation, and enhancing immune function by activating macrophages and natural killer cells. The evidence base is strong enough that the FDA permits a specific health claim on products containing beta-glucan, reduced risk of coronary heart disease. Studies have shown barley outperforms oats, already considered among the most heart-protective grains, in its effect on post-meal blood glucose. The meal Jesus chose to multiply for the hungry was not chosen randomly. The provision of the ordinary was the medicine of the wise. Number 11. Garlic and onion stew, mourned alongside leeks and fish by the Israelites in Numbers 11.5, distributed to Egyptian pyramid workers in documented rations to maintain their strength and immune function, with allicin from garlic confirmed in meta-analyses to reduce blood pressure by approximately 8 millimeters of mercury. The garlic and onion stew of Egypt was not a flavor preference. It was medicine embedded in daily food. Ancient Egyptian records, including the Ebers Papyrus from approximately 1500 BCE, list garlic in over 20 medical preparations for conditions ranging from cardiovascular complaints to parasites and infections. Workers building the Egyptian pyramids were given garlic rations specifically to maintain their physical endurance and resistance to infection. The Hebrew slaves who built those same structures ate the same garlic. When it was removed from their diet in the wilderness, their bodies noticed. Allicin, produced when garlic is crushed, allowing alliinase to convert alliin on contact with air, is a broad-spectrum antimicrobial active against bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites. Meta-analyses of clinical trials have confirmed that regular garlic consumption reduces systolic blood pressure by approximately 8 millimeters of mercury and meaningfully lowers LDL cholesterol. Combined with onion, whose quercetin inhibits the same inflammatory enzymes as pharmaceutical NSAIDs and whose inulin fructans specifically feed beneficial gut bacteria, garlic and onion stew was a meal that simultaneously addressed cardiovascular risk, immune function, gut microbiome diversity, and infection resistance. The modern diet replaced this combination with processed soups and flavoring agents. What was lost was not the taste, it was the medicine. Number 12. Roasted lamb with herbs, the centerpiece of the Passover meal in Exodus 12, providing complete protein with all essential amino acids, zinc at concentrations that support immune function and wound healing, and conjugated linoleic acid from pasture-raised animals with documented anti-inflammatory and body composition effects. The Passover lamb was not merely symbolic. God's instruction in Exodus 12 to roast the lamb whole, not boiled, not raw, but fire-roasted, reflects a preparation method that modern food science has confirmed preserves the highest proportion of fat-soluble vitamins and produces the lowest formation of harmful compounds compared to other high-temperature cooking methods. Lamb from pasture-raised animals provides complete protein with all essential amino acids in ratios that support muscle synthesis and repair. It is among the richest dietary sources of zinc, the mineral essential for immune cell production, wound healing, and the enzymatic reactions involved in DNA synthesis and protein metabolism. Zinc deficiency is associated with impaired immune function, delayed wound healing, and growth retardation, and subclinical insufficiency is far more common in modern populations consuming grain-heavy diets than is generally recognized. Pasture-raised lamb also contains conjugated linoleic acid, CLA, a fatty acid produced by ruminant animals grazing on grass, with documented anti-inflammatory effects and research interest in body composition and cancer biology. The Passover lamb was not a coincidental centerpiece. It was the most nutritionally complete animal protein available in the ancient Near Eastern world, prepared in the method that best preserved its therapeutic value. Number 13. Cumin-spiced legumes, from the spice Jesus named specifically in Matthew 23:23, as valuable enough to tithe to the temple, combined with the legumes that appear throughout biblical cuisine, with clinical trials documenting cumin's ability to reduce fasting blood glucose and HbA1c in type 2 diabetic patients. Matthew 23:23 records Jesus acknowledging that cumin was genuinely worth tithing. Things of real worth are what you bring to God, while making a point about priorities. That acknowledgement tells us cumin was a substance of genuine medicinal and economic significance in first-century Palestine. Cumin has been used medically for 4,000 years across the Middle East, India, and North Africa, specifically for digestion, blood sugar regulation, and infection. Combined with the legumes, lentils, chickpeas, fava beans, black beans, that formed the protein backbone of the biblical diet, Cumin creates a meal that is simultaneously prebiotic, high protein, low glycemic, and metabolically supportive in ways that modern nutritional pharmacology is still mapping. Clinical trials have documented that cumin supplementation meaningfully reduces fasting blood glucose and HbA1c in patients with type 2 diabetes, the same metabolic markers that pharmaceutical diabetes management targets. Cumin also stimulates bile production and digestive enzyme secretion, which improves the absorption of nutrients from the legumes it is paired with. The ancient world combined these ingredients not because they tasted good together, although they do, but because generations of observation had demonstrated that people who ate them felt well, digested well, and remained vital through demanding physical labor. That observation was correct. Number 14. Fig and honey, from the fruit whose poultice healed King Hezekiah's infection in 2 Kings 20, and the antimicrobial that appears over 20 times in Scripture, combined into a meal providing phycin enzymes, pectin prebiotic fiber, defensin 1 protein that destroys bacterial cell walls, and natural sugars that powered the ancient world's most demanding labor. Figs and honey appear together throughout the biblical narrative as symbols of abundance and blessing. But their combination is also one of the most therapeutically complete simple meals in the ancient pantry. Figs contain phycin, a proteolytic enzyme that breaks down dead tissue and promotes healing, alongside pectin, a soluble fiber that feeds beneficial gut bacteria and regulates bowel function. They are extraordinarily mineral-dense: magnesium, potassium, calcium, and B vitamins in concentrations that made them the supplement of a world without multivitamins. Raw honey contributes defensin 1, the protein that actively destroys bacterial cell walls, including those of methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. It provides hydrogen peroxide through enzymatic activity on contact with tissue. It has been found in Egyptian tombs 3,000 years old, still fully edible. No food on Earth has comparable shelf stability because no food on Earth has comparable antimicrobial density. Together, figs and honey create a meal that is simultaneously prebiotic, antimicrobial, mineral-rich, and energizing. The kind of complete nutritional provision that sustained desert travelers, prophets, and armies across the harshest terrain in the ancient world. The modern diet replaced this combination with processed snack bars, whose ingredient lists bear no relationship to what is being replaced. Number 15. Pomegranate seeds. From the fruit carved into Solomon's temple pillars in 1 Kings 7 and embroidered on priestly garments in Exodus 28, eaten as a meal or alongside meals containing punicalagins found almost nowhere else in nature that produce urolithins in the gut with anti-inflammatory and emerging anti-cancer research interest. 200 carved pomegranates decorated the pillars of Solomon's temple. The high priest garments were embroidered with pomegranates at the hem. When a civilization embeds a fruit into the architecture of its most sacred space and the garments of its most sacred office, it is because that fruit has earned its status through generations of observed benefit. Eating the seeds as a meal, the way the ancient world consumed them, extracting each jewel-like aril and eating them fresh, provides the full spectrum of the fruit's compounds in the form the body evolved to receive them. Punicalagins are metabolized in the gut to urolithins by specific bacterial species, and the efficiency of this conversion varies between individuals based on microbiome composition. Clinical trials have confirmed pomegranate's effects on blood pressure reduction, arterial wall flexibility, LDL oxidation reduction, and inflammatory marker reduction. Research on urolithins has attracted serious interest in cancer biology for their anti-proliferative effects on certain cancer cell lines. The rind, consumed in traditional medicine as a tea, contains even higher concentrations of the active compounds than the seeds. The fruit sacred enough to decorate the space where humans encountered the divine was simultaneously the most antioxidant-dense food in their daily diet. Number 16. Olive oil over everything. Referenced over 140 times in Scripture, used to anoint kings and heal wounds. At the center of the Mediterranean diet confirmed in the pre-dimed trial to reduce cardiovascular events by 30%, containing oleocanthal that inhibits cyclooxygenase enzymes through the identical mechanism as ibuprofen. Olive oil appears more frequently in Scripture than almost any other substance. Kings were anointed with it, the temple lamp burned it, the Good Samaritan poured it into wounds, James prescribed it for the sick. The olive tree itself is the symbol of peace and permanence. Some trees in Gethsemane are believed to be over 2,000 years old, living witnesses to the night Christ prayed among them. In the ancient biblical diet, olive oil was not a condiment. It was poured over everything, over bread, over vegetables, over legumes, over meat. This was not profligacy. It was functional medicine. The Paradigmed trial, one of the largest dietary intervention studies ever conducted, found that participants consuming a Mediterranean diet supplemented with extra virgin olive oil had a 30% reduction in major cardiovascular events compared to a low-fat control diet. The mechanism was identified when a researcher noticed that freshly pressed, high-quality olive oil produced a throat irritation identical to liquid ibuprofen, revealing oleocanthal, a polyphenol that inhibits COX-1 and COX-2 cyclooxygenase enzymes through the same mechanism as pharmaceutical anti-inflammatory drugs. The modern diet replaced olive oil with refined seed oils invented in the 20th century, canola, soybean, corn, cottonseed, whose inflammatory profiles are the subject of growing scientific concern. The ancient world poured medicine over its food. The modern world replaced it with something cheaper to produce. Number 17. Date and almond meal. From the fruit mentioned more than any other in Scripture and the Quran combined, and the nut whose blossom God chose for the design of the menorah in Exodus 25, with multiple randomized controlled trials confirming that women consuming dates in the final weeks of pregnancy had significantly faster and smoother deliveries. The date palm sustained ancient civilizations across the harshest terrain on Earth, not because it was the most flavorful food available, but because it was the most reliably nourishing in the most demanding conditions. Calorie-dense, shelf-stable for months, rich in minerals and natural sugars, dates were what kept armies moving, traders crossing desert routes, and pilgrims completing journeys that would have been impossible without this provision. The clinical trial data for dates is among the most surprising in all of biblical food research. Multiple randomized controlled trials have found that women consuming 6 dates daily in the final 4 weeks of pregnancy had significantly higher cervical dilation at hospital admission, more spontaneous labor onset, and shorter active labor phases, with mechanisms involving oxytocin receptor sensitization and uterotonic activity from the date's tannin compounds. Combined with almonds, whose blossom God chose as the design motif for the menorah, the symbol of divine watchfulness, you create a meal that delivers the rapid, natural energy of dates, moderated by the healthy fats and vitamin E of almonds, preventing the blood sugar spike that dates alone would produce, and providing the magnesium involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions. The modern diet replaced this meal with processed energy bars and commercial snacks that share none of the biology of what they replaced. Number 18. Almond and pistachio meal. From the nuts Jacob selected as gifts worthy of a ruler in Genesis 43:11, with pistachios uniquely high in lutein and zeaxanthin for macular protection, containing more potassium than most nuts, and shown in clinical studies to significantly increase bifidobacterium in the gut more than almost any other nut tested. When Jacob instructed his sons to bring gifts to the powerful Egyptian official, not knowing it was Joseph, he selected items worthy of a ruler: balm, honey, spices, myrrh, pistachio nuts, and almonds. Genesis 43:11. The inclusion of pistachios and almonds among the finest gifts Jacob possessed tells us these were understood as luxury foods of genuine value. Modern nutritional analysis confirms why. Pistachios are uniquely high in lutein and zeaxanthin, the carotenoids that concentrate in the macula of the eye and protect against age-related macular degeneration, the leading cause of vision loss in people over 50. They contain more potassium per serving than most nuts, supporting blood pressure regulation. Clinical studies have documented that regular pistachio consumption increases bifidobacterium and lactobacillus species in the gut more substantially than most other nuts tested, contributing to the microbiome diversity associated with immune resilience and metabolic health. Almonds contribute vitamin E at 37% of the daily requirement per ounce, magnesium for over 300 enzymatic reactions, and LDL-lowering effects confirmed in clinical trials. Together as a meal, these two nuts provide a complete nutritional package: healthy fats, complete protein, prebiotic fiber, vitamins, minerals, and eye-protective carotenoids in the most portable, shelf-stable form available to the ancient world. Jacob understood value. What he sent as gifts worthy of a ruler was medicine. Number 19. Coriander spiced stew, from the seed compared directly to manna in Exodus 16:31 and found in Tutankhamun's tomb, with modern research documenting anxiolytic effects comparable to diazepam in animal models, and antimicrobial activity against food-borne pathogens that explain its universal presence in ancient cuisine. When God provided manna in the wilderness, the most extraordinary food event in all of Scripture, the text needed a reference point for something unprecedented. It was like coriander seed, white. Exodus 16:31. That comparison was immediately understood by every Israelite, because coriander was universally familiar and universally valued. Coriander seeds were found among the burial goods of Tutankhamun. Their presence among a pharaoh's treasures signals how highly they were valued across both the biblical and wider ancient world. As a spice in slow-cooked stews, the primary prepared meal format of the ancient Near East, coriander seed delivers warm, slightly citrusy compounds with genuine pharmacological activity. Animal studies have documented anxiolytic effects from coriander seed extract comparable to diazepam through GABA-A receptor modulation, the same receptor system targeted by benzodiazepine pharmaceuticals. Antimicrobial activity against Salmonella, E. coli, and other foodborne pathogens has been confirmed, which may explain why coriander appears in virtually every ancient cuisine that had access to it. Not merely because it tasted good, but because it made the food safer to eat in a world without refrigeration or food safety infrastructure. The seed common enough in the ancient world to describe the taste of heaven was medicine woven into the fabric of daily cooking. Number 20. Raw honey with comb, the meal that brightened Jonathan's eyes in the 1 Samuel 14:27 when he tasted it after a period of food deprivation, containing defensin 1 that destroys bacterial cell walls, hydrogen peroxide antimicrobial activity, 3,000-year shelf stability confirmed by archaeologists finding edible honey in Egyptian tombs, and a closing truth about what the modern diet traded away. 1 Samuel 14:27 records one of the most specific physiological observations in all of Scripture. The Israelites are in battle under a fasting command from Saul. Jonathan, who had not heard the command, dips the end of his rod in a honeycomb. He tastes it, and Scripture records his eyes brightened. This is not metaphor. It is an observation of what happens to the human body when raw honey is consumed after a period of food deprivation. The rapid bioavailability of natural glucose and fructose, the immediate sensory alertness, the physiological restoration that the ancient world associated with honey as a food that gave strength and clarity. Raw honey with comb delivers the honey in its most intact form. The wax comb filters the honey, preserves its temperature-sensitive enzymes, and provides beeswax with its own anti-inflammatory compounds. Defensin 1, the protein that actively destroys bacterial cell walls, including MRSA, is preserved. Hydrogen peroxide production on contact with tissue is preserved. The 3,000-year-old honey found in Egyptian tombs still edible is preserved. The modern diet replaced this with processed honey heated past 40 degrees Celsius, destroying the enzymes and antimicrobial compounds, filtered to extend shelf life, and diluted with corn syrup in some commercial products. What was traded away was not the sweetness survived. What was lost was the medicine. And that, in a single meal, is the story of the entire modern diet. The sweetness survived, the medicine did not. It is still available. It requires only the knowledge of where to look and the willingness to eat the way Scripture prescribes. 20 meals. All of them in Scripture. All of them confirmed by modern research. All of them replaced by something cheaper, faster, more profitable, and less healing. The modern diet did not displace biblical food because it was better. It displaced it because it was more scalable. The industrial food system optimized for everything except the thing that mattered most, what these meals actually did to the body that ate them. The people who ate these meals for thousands of years did not have nutritional labels or clinical trials. They had observation. They watched what happened to bodies that ate this way consistently, and they built their culture, their law, their ritual, and their daily practice around those observations. Modern science is now arriving at the same conclusions through completely different methods. The meals were right. They always were. They are still available. The only thing the modern diet successfully took was the memory of them. That memory can be recovered. If this changed how you see what belongs on your table, hit the like button and share this with someone who has forgotten these meals exist. Drop a comment and tell me which one surprised you most. Subscribe and ring the bell. I will see you in the next one.